I'm
Oh,
sure he's exhausted.
God bless those guys. I mean, I think of all these dickhead, hate Trump and therefore hate the military people. And some of them used to be friends of mine. I remember, and we'll get going here. I just need to say this, but because I don't want boots on the ground in Iran or some of these other things, one a guy I used to know is like, well, now that you're a peacenik, do you regret all of those rah military things you used to do? Um,
Wow.
the fact that I don't regret a single one of the rah military things I used to do is part of the reason that I don't want boots on the ground any more than President Trump does. That doesn't
Yeah.
make me a peacenik. It means that I'm against perpetual wars and I respect the military and love them and their families enough not to want them in harm's way unless it cannot be avoided.
Right. No, I agree.
Jeez.
It's now more than ever. I agree.
All right, count us down in three, two, one. Hi, I'm Richard Randall, and welcome to Your Real Estate Voice with Barb Schlinker, the owner of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty. This is the weekly radio show that informs and educates you on how to buy or sell real estate with Colorado's Real Estate Authority. Barb Schlinker. Barb Schlinker is a retired Navy veteran. Barb is an author. Barb Schlinker is also a pilot, and Barb and her team enjoy all that Colorado and the Front Range have to offer. Barb, always great to be talking with you. Now, we air Your Real Estate Voice every Saturday. If you can't listen to the entire show, it is always available on Barb's site. Barb has barbhasthebuyers.com, or search Barb on most of the popular podcast platforms like iHeartRadio. So, Barb, what are we talking about this weekend?
Well, Richard, the first topic's going to have to do with, excuse me, housing prices and whether or not they're coming down. Um, this year, the biggest change, for probably from 2020 all the way through really just up until this year, there's been perpetually low inventory. And so that kept the prices pretty strong, pretty high, and going up. But this year, the number of available homes has shot up by 29%. And obviously, if the buyers have more homes to choose from, it's a supply and demand thing. It does kind of have a slight softening effect, kind of teetering on a buyer's market right now. So it really, really depends on where the seller decides to position the home price wise. Homes sell year round in any kind of market. However, the best way to get it done quickly is to price it realistically. So we'll talk about some of the different areas around the Front Range and how they're doing and go into some detail on that. And then the next one I'm going to talk about is about interviewing real estate agents. So it's just like you interview any other contractor. You want the right information to make the best decision. Not all real estate agents are the same by far. In fact, I find it very frustrating. It's probably getting more and more frustrating as time goes on for me that there really is no job description for real estate agents. There is no how to, there is no structure. Just this morning, I had some agent giving me grief saying he's going to turn me into the MLS and the real estate police because the seller had restrictions about how they wanted the inspection done. Like they're not going to allow an unlicensed, unqualified person to run a scope through their sewer line. They're going to be there for the inspection and they can schedule it when they want it done. They'll make the home available when they want it done. There's certain rules, like even recently on the showing, that particular house had something damaged. Somebody was messing with the blinds and broke it. So, you just can't let people go willy nilly in a house because they will touch things. In this case, the seller has videos up. She was watching video of people not supervising their kids, and they were crawling into areas where they don't belong, opening cabinets. And it's like, wow. So it's the same with inspectors. There's no entitlement for the inspector to have the house to themselves, nor the buyer's agent, nor the buyer to have the house to themselves. but this agent's yelling at me because he thought there was an entitlement. And I'm just like, okay, whatever. If you want to wallow in the mud, go ahead. I don't really care, but there's no rule about that. And so it creates some conflicts sometimes, contract to closing, because the agents, if they don't have the expertise or background or knowledge, they just assume whatever they've done in the past is the way you do it. So it's very, very important on home sellers to ask the right questions when it comes to interviewing agents, and we're going to cover that. The third topic is about what do buyer's agents do and whether or not having a buyer's agent is really worth it in Colorado. I get that question an awful lot from buyers and sellers. So what do you do for me? And what am I paying for? And what if the seller doesn't pay? I have to pay for that. And what do I get for it? It's a very good question. And there are some agents that really don't know how to articulate or share their value. And the very last topic is a good one, because right now, since there is surging inventory on the market, this topic is about the top 6 seller mistakes that can cause a house not to sell and how you avoid them. And as always, I love talking about my hot new listings. Richard?
Barb, if you look online at home prices, it gives the impression that in some areas of the country, home prices are falling. So, what are you seeing for home prices here on the Front Range of Colorado?
Well, the prices aren't exactly dropping like an elevator. I would say they're slightly less than they were 2 years ago, but not substantially. We're talking about a few percentage points. The median list price varies day to day. The average days on market definitely has gone up. It's 74 days on average in El Paso County, and about half the people have reduced their price. So that tells me out of the gate they're pricing too high and then have to lower their price to catch a buyer. And the inventory at the same time is going up. That means it's just a supply and demand equation. That means that there's more homes on the market, more choices for buyers to choose from. So that means that homes aren't selling quite as fast. Some other areas like Douglas County, a little bit of correction in price, but at the same time, their average days on market's a little bit less, 67 days, and they don't have a whole lot of inventory in Douglas County. I've been watching some blogs about Denver. Denver's inventory has really surged. So if you're a home seller right now in this market, you need somebody that can help you sit down, take a hard look at the market, figure out what your goals are. There are some people, they're not in a hurry to sell and they're going to wait for their price, and there's nothing wrong with that. But at the end of the day, it's all about getting it priced right to get the buyer to sell. You can ask anything you want for a house. The house is not going to sell until a buyer sees value and is willing to pay that price. Teller County is another area where actually the summertime is prime time. It's so beautiful up there. It stays that way through the fall, and the median list price has actually gone up. Inventory definitely has gone up quite a bit, but the average days on market there is over 100 days. Another area, Pueblo area along the Front Range, the median list price is just corrected just a little bit. Average days on market much longer there, 113 days, and inventory is surging. And pretty much across the Front Range, um, about half the home sellers initially priced too high, and then they realize the market's not reacting to it and they drop their price. But really, this is all about affordability. Interest rates have corrected a tiny bit, but they're pretty stable, anywhere from conventional 6.75 up to 7 for the last 4 months. And then also the FHA and VA loans are about 0.5% less than that, in the low sixes. So for home buyers, especially first-time home buyers, it's all about whether or not they can afford the payment. And so if they can't afford the payment, then they're not doing anything. So what we're seeing basically across the years, if you go back a number of years ago, we're seeing from 2019 to 2022, the prices really surged up, but the buyer's income did not. So that means that, it's all about affordability for the buyers. And then it takes a long time for buyers to save for a down payment. depending on what state you're in. California, it takes 10 years. The median price out there is over $800,000. That's a lot of money for most people. In Colorado, it's about 5 years to save for a down payment, unless you get help from family or whatever. And I see that a lot of that going on. I've seen a few sales where mom has stepped in and bought a house for their kids because they have good savings over their lifetime. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I was kind of discussing it with my husband. He goes, if I look back on the 80s when I was working, I was making a decent salary at the time as compared. He goes, I didn't have any problem affording a house, but right now I think the young people are. So we're really hoping that the president is able to convince the Fed to make a difference on interest rates over the next year or so. And once that happens, I think the market's just going to take off. So if you are thinking of making a move, I wouldn't completely rely on the Zillow's estimates of values. Everybody thinks Zillow is the gold standard for what a home is worth, but half the time Zillow doesn't know what the home has. They don't know if they have half the square footage on there many times. They may not have the correct count for bedrooms, baths, and all they're doing is averaging the homes around you. The reason why people pay attention to Zillow is that they've created a better mousetrap. They have over 220 million monthly visitors. And a lot of those people register, they know what they're looking for. And so when you go on the market, you have to make that best first impression, especially in the first 30 days. The market is going to speak back to you immediately if you missed it on price and or marketing. And that's why the first showing absolutely is online. And most buyers, they have a pretty good knowledge about what the market's doing. So if you are thinking of making a move, give us a call at 719-301-3900. We've got lots of buyers on our website. Typically, I can match at least 800 buyers to any house, and we can sit down and give you a really good idea what your home will sell for in this market. Just call us 719-301-3900 or barbhasthebuyers.com. Richard.
You're listening to Your Real Estate Voice with Barb Schlinker of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty. And you can reach Barb and her team at 719-301-3900. We're talking about whether or not home prices will continue to rise. So, Barb, will you please share with us the current market trends as you're seeing them?
Well, typically this summer, the prices peak out, the number of sales peak out, and we're not exactly seeing that. We're seeing prices go up to some extent, but we're also seeing inventory go up. So again, it's supply and demand. And I think that as that trend continues, typically in the summer, you'll see more and more people put their home on the market. It's really, really critical to be priced realistically and marketed realistically. That doesn't necessarily mean it has to be completely updated. I've sold quite a few homes this year that weren't updated at all, but for those cases, the seller decided to price it correctly and realistically. So with more supply on the market, it is leaning towards a buyer's market. Expect some negotiation. Expect some back and forth between the buyer and seller, unless the seller has priced it in such a way that there's multiple offers. And then for buyers, all bets are off. They just have to put their best offer, their best foot forward in order to get that home. So pricing is absolutely critical. The marketing has to be top notch, because if you only have less than a minute to make an impression online, and that's where the decisions are made by the buyer as to whether or not they're going to come look at the home, then that is why marketing is critical. And that's what a good real estate agent will help you do. If you are thinking of making a move, give us a call at 719-301-3900 or visit barbhasthebuyers.com. Richard.
You're listening to Your Real Estate Voice. That's Barb Schlinker of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, host of the program. I sit in with her, and if you're thinking of making a move, call Barb at 719-301-3900 or visit barbhasthebuyers.com. We'll take a short break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about what questions should a home seller ask when they're interviewing a real estate agent here in Colorado. Don't miss that. I I hit pretty heavily when I'm talking. I hit pretty heavily that you just cannot ask somebody how long they've been in business. And because I always say, well, yeah, it sounds impressive to say you've been in real estate for 10 years until you find out the person has sold 20 houses in 10 years or a couple homes per year or something. The interview thing I dwell on because I think it really, it plays right to your strength, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, everybody
And how
has their
many
preference.
agents would you recommend to interview in
Oh,
that
that's a good
process?
question. Actually, I hadn't done.
That's a really good question. I would say probably three. Three would be okay. Um, People don't want to spend a lot of time with agents, and I think uh, three is probably average, but from what the National Association of Realtors reports in their annual report, more than half of them only talk to one. They go back to whoever they've used before. Um, and and sometimes, they've retired or, they're not in real estate anymore. Um, and then they start looking around. So it just depends on the consumer. Some are very detailed and very careful about who they interview, and some of them it's just a gut feel, so um, it's a big decision. I think it's a big decision. I was just looking and we can start the show. I was looking at a listing last night. Somebody was frustrated with their agent, and oh my God, he was good at repelling buyers
That's
with
not
his
supposed to
pictures.
be your strength when you're in real estate, is it?
No, it's not. It's terrible.
That's what I was kind of thinking. I mean, I'm not an expert. I mean, you're the expert and stuff, but that didn't sound like that's the way the system is best operated. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't think. Anyway, we'll talk about it. It's more of a education thing, you know.
yeah. Okay. Let me get my clock set again. I'm all excited because I found a new clock that's better than the old clock.
Maybe if you see a point to
What kind of clock?
how many.
Oh, no, that's a good question. Yeah, actually, I will. Yeah. All right, let's count us down then in three, two, one. Welcome back to Your Real Estate Voice with Barb Schlinker, the weekly radio show that informs and educates you on how to buy or sell real estate with Barb Schlinker, the owner broker of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty and the host of the program. Barb, I know many people ask you questions when they're getting ready to sell their homes. What are the top questions that home sellers should be asking before they put their home up for sale?
Well, Richard, I think a majority of the home sellers that I speak to, I ask them what's most important to them. And I don't always get the same answer, but I would say a large percentage of them want the most money that they can get, which makes sense, right? However, right now homes are taking longer to sell. So and then we've got fewer buyers on the market, we've got higher inventory on the market. So the buyers, I think, are very savvy about what's out there in their price range. They're very well educated. And they're reaching out to me many times and asking questions about some of my properties and trying to get an opportunity to get in and buy it. Especially if it's priced right. So if it's not priced right, it's kind of a ho hum and it's not moving the bar. One of the ones I looked at last night, it was priced okay, but they had some really bad pictures. Whoever they hired to market really didn't know what he was doing. The couple of the photos that he put out there online were what I thought buyer repellent photos. It's like, why are you doing that? So I don't think people, the problem is in the real estate industry, it's basically 1 month of school to be a real estate broker. And there's no standardization on what real estate agents do and what they bring to the table. I was speaking with one yesterday and he had been interviewing agents, and I asked him, I said, did any of these other agents go over any of this stuff with you? And he goes, no. So a lot of people just show up and go, your house is worth X, here, sign here, and let me get it on the market. They don't, some do, but some don't actually give them an idea of what they could expect. So right now, it's, instead of a seller's market, it's more of a buyer's market. And that means to get your house sold and get the most money, you have to present the home as being the best available home on the market. And that takes pricing it right, having it prepared properly, having it promoted properly, and most of all, hiring the right agent that can get the job done. So let's kind of talk about some questions that should be asked. One of them is, how do I prepare my home before I sell it? And we get this question all the time, and they want to know, so should I fix this? Should I replace that? Some of the questions are really interesting, like, should I put in a tankless water heater, or should I give a allowance for my tired, worn carpet? And I will tell you, things like flooring, it's a mistake not to make it fresh unless you've really discounted the price of the home. Because, in fact, I was looking at one last night online that it looked like a good house in a good area, but it was very obvious that the carpet was stained and needed restretching, and it needed replacing. And the house sold for probably 5 times less than what it would have cost to replace the carpet. So some sellers make a mistake and just say, well, I'll just sell it as is. I'm not going to do any updating. And that's fine if they want to do that. But it would have cost only $5,000 to sell the carpet. It would have cost only $5,000 to replace the carpet, but they dropped the price by about $25,000 or $30,000 to get it sold. So you really need people that understand the market, that are selling homes all the time. So part of what we do is, when we come out, we actually take a look at the home, give you good ideas on what to do, what not to do to get the house ready for sale, give you a great idea what the home will sell for and how much you'll put in your pocket when it sells. And I'd say one of the top questions, of course, that we get is, what is my house worth? Well, what your house is worth is what a buyer is willing to pay. It's not what the agent says it's worth. It's not what Zillow says it's worth. It's not what the seller says it's worth. And some people will look at the improvements that they put in the home and add that to the price. And if the improvement is truly an upgrade, like it goes from Formica counters to granite, and granite is the standard for the neighborhood, it may not be an upgrade. It might just be a standard of what's expected. However, if you're in a neighborhood that doesn't normally have granite, it might be an over upgrade. So that's why you need the advice of somebody that does this all the time and actually sells homes all the time. But at the end of the day, the market decides what it will sell for. And what that is what the buyer is willing to pay. So, we can give you a good idea what similar homes have sold for. We also take a look at what's available, because the buyers don't care too much about historic sales. They need that for the appraisal. But what they care about is, what can I get right now in my price range? So that's what we do, is we sit down and give you very empirical data. We give you a good idea on what other homes are selling for, whether or not they had to lower the price or pay some buyer closing cost. We will show them our cash offers for their home, and we'll also show them what's getting contracts right now, because that's an indication of what the market's willing to pay at this time. Just last weekend, we had over 35 people. Actually, it was 37 people in the 1-hour open house. We got 2 offers, and it sold for asking price. So when you do that and you get it sold quickly, 13 times faster than the average agent, that means it was priced realistically for a reason. So another question we get, and it's a good question, is, how long will it take for my house to sell? So if it's priced on target, it shouldn't take more than 10 to 14 days. But if it's a little bit overpriced, the market's going to tell you right away, based on the volume of showings, based on the calls, based on the interest, whether or not the market sees that as value. Okay. And sometimes you might get an offer you don't like, and that's okay. If you're getting offers, it's good. It means you're kind of in the wheelhouse. and another buyer will come along. So don't worry about it. Right now, 40 to 50% of home sellers are actually reducing their price just to get a buyer. So if we're seeing a lot of price reductions, then that's obviously not the right price. It's not what the market's willing to pay. So you have to be really careful when you interview agents. There are some agents that will say, oh, I can get you $1 million, but the reality is the market won't do it, right? And then your house sits on the market, it gets kind of tired and seen by everybody, and buyers really won't either come look at it or they won't make offers. Sometimes if you're getting views and no offers, that either means when they get to the house, you have a condition issue, or it's just a little bit overpriced. So in general, the rules of thumb about that if you are on the market, if you've got 10 showings and no offers, you're too high. If you go 10 days without any showings, you're too high. And if you're getting offers, then that's a good sign. It might just be another one. Wait for the right one if that's not the one that you want. Some buyers will come to you and ask you to reserve your house for them while they wait for their home to sell. That's called a sale contingency, and it could work out, but it's a big risk for most home sellers because we have to tell the local MLS that you've accepted a contract, which will effectively stop other agents from showing, because the way those are marked in the system, it looks on other websites as to the buyers as if it's unavailable. So it's not a great idea for most home sellers. So you'll have basically a loss of certainty as far as when you will actually get to the finish line. We have systems in place. We can provide cash offers for pretty much any address in the country, so we can solve that problem. Now, if the person buying your home has a contract on their home, it's more likely to go through than not. So that's a little bit less of a risk than accepting a contingency. You wouldn't believe how many agents come to me and go, will you accept a contract contingent on my buyer's house selling, but it's not on the market yet? And so I asked one agent a few months ago, I said, okay, well, where are you going to price that home? And she goes, well, I don't know, but it has granite. And it turned out the seller accepted their contingent contract, and 10 days later, her home goes on the market and it's way overpriced, like by $150,000. That thing wasn't going to sell while we were still young. So we can put protections in place. In that case, the seller wanted to accept that offer, and if they do, then that's fine. But fortunately, the deal blew up over inspection, and we were able to get a different buyer in there that actually could be performed. And then another good question is, what about staging? Is that really important? Absolutely. How you present a home online could be the difference between buyers wanting to come see it or not. So it's critical. My name is Barb Schlinker. I am the broker owner of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty and the host of this show, Your Real Estate Voice. And we're talking about the top questions that you should consider asking when you're interviewing agents. And next up, we're going to talk about a couple of more questions. So if you are thinking of making a move, give us a call, 719-301-3900, or go to barbhasthebuyers.com. Richard?
Barb, we're discussing the top questions that a home seller should ask when they're getting ready to sell their home. Everyone knows I've been recommending you for years. Tell us about some of the key questions a home seller should ask a real estate agent during that interview, and how many should they interview?
It's a great question, and I think in general, if you understand the statistical data about agents, I think in Colorado, there's around 40,000. Along the Pikes Peak region, there's about 6,300, maybe 35,000 in Denver. 87% of the agents get out of the business every 5 years. And 81% of them sell 3 or less homes per year. So that would be one of the questions. How many homes do you sell in a year? How many have you sold in the last few years? And then another good question is, why should we pick you over the other choices? That's a good question. But how much time does the seller need to spend interviewing agents? It's really up to them. They should feel comfortable. It's one of their largest assets. In general, I would say 3 is probably a really good number. And if you could be happy with the first one and cancel the other 2 appointments, there's nothing wrong with that either. However, if it were me knowing what I know, I would look at all the options and then make the best decision that works for you. It's interesting. The National Association of Realtors says that a majority of the home sellers only talk to one. They just go to somebody they knew, somebody they're referred to, or maybe the person that sold them the house if they're still in business. So it depends on what the seller's preference is and kind of what their experience was previously with that agent. And then we sit down with our clients, we talk about value. Another good question is, how long of an agreement can I sign? And if I'm not happy, can I get out of that agreement? That's a really good question, because the way the state forms are designed, it's not very clear. In fact, there's actually no promise of marketing that goes on in the state agreements. It's more about tying the agent to the seller. But there is a paragraph in there that says that if the agent promised something, either verbally or in writing, and they did not perform, that gives you grounds to terminate their agreement. There are some agents that will charge money for that, which is not good if it wasn't previously agreed to. You don't want that kind of relationship. You want somebody that really has your back and wants you to get to the finish line. So if you are thinking of making a move, we'd love to be one of the ones you interview. Give us a call, 719-301-3900, or go to barbhasthebuyers.com. Richard?
If you're listening to Your Real Estate Voice with Barb Schlinker of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, and if you are thinking of making a move, simply call Barb at 719-301-3900 or visit barbhasthebuyers.com. And if you want a free report, the top 10 questions to ask before you hire a real estate agent, visit barbhasthebuyers.com. Go to the green button. It'll be in the upper right-hand corner. It says free reports. Click there. A short break. When we come back, we'll be discussing, is it worth having a buyer's agent here in Colorado? Barb has that answer. There you go. That was in pretty good time too, actually.
Here we go. Drama world.
All right, let me take a sip of Red Bull so I'm ready for all this drama.
I'll try to tone it down.
You know, it is funny because I'm trying to think of the jobs that I've had. What's that?
Please don't tone it
I know,
down.
right? I'm trying to think of the jobs that I've had. Either the job itself was inherently filled with drama, or the people who did whatever it was for a profession were filled with drama, whether it was law, whether it was television. And you've got kind of both. There's some inherent drama to, I guess, to negotiating, buying and selling and all that. But man, you have dramatic characters from the get-go.
Yeah. And they all have their preconceived notion about what their job is. And that's where it gets exciting.
Yeah, it'd be pretty convenient if I just get to define my job, regardless of whatever I'm supposed to be doing or anything like that. Yeah, well, no, I don't have to do that. I mean, you're the one supposed to take care of that. And my job means that I can have a pizza party here while we're shoving some thing down the toilet and taking it off and ruining it and letting squatters into the house. All right, I got a new clock. I am good to go, or so I say. Count us down in 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to Your Real Estate Voice with Barb Schlinker, the weekly radio show that informs and educates you on how to buy or sell real estate with Barb Schlinker, the owner of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty. Now, the commission is negotiation, Barb. What buyers are starting to question the value of working with a buyer's agent? Is it a good idea or a bad idea?
Well, it's really up to the buyer. I mean, when you go to real estate school, excuse me, hang on.
You know what? Let me do that from the beginning because I don't think I read that very well. I'm going to start from the very beginning if I could,
All right.
David. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to Your Real Estate Voice with Barb Schlinker, the weekly radio show that informs and educates you on how to buy or sell real estate with Barb Schlinker, the owner broker of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty. Barb, now that commission is negotiable, are buyers starting to question the value of even working with a buyer's agent?
I'd say yes, more and more. Actually, just the other day, I had somebody call me, and the way he phrased the question, at first he said he did not have an agent. He wanted us to show him one of my listings. And I said, okay, well, I've got, people on my team that can do that. And then he said, well, let me ask you a question. Would you basically switch allegiance to me? It basically is what he said. In order, so if I could buy the house and give me a discount, right? So that's really their objective, is I think if they go directly to the listing agent, they're going to get a discount on the fee. But my answer was absolutely not. He says, oh, okay, well, I have a friend that's a real estate agent and I'll have that person show it to me. I said, fine. I thought you didn't have an agent. What happened to that? But it doesn't matter to me. I think there are some really good agents out there that know what they're doing, and there are some that don't. And so, um, it's up to the agent to sit down with the buyer and articulate their value. And that became the rule last year. Now that the buyer's agent commission is negotiable, they have to have in writing with their client who will pay their fee. And I just looked at one that came on one of my listings last week, where he had that agreement that he wanted 3%, but if the seller didn't pay 3%, the buyer didn't have to pay. Sometimes they ask the buyer to pay, and that's their decision. The question is, do they bring value to the table? So, and that's the big question. So I would say right now, part of the problem is a lot of agents feel like they're told that if you sign an agency agreement, you have to be what they call a fiduciary. That means that you put your client's needs ahead of your own. But I've had some people violate that. I recently had an offer on one of my listings where I don't know what his agreement was with this buyer. There were competing offers on that home, and he insisted on getting his 3%. The seller was not willing to pay his 3%. So guess what? His buyer didn't get the house. So did he really put his buyer's needs ahead of his own? I don't think so. Then he sent an anonymous letter, I think it was him, to the seller saying, well, yeah, she's about commission. And he's just started talking smack about me, which was kind of funny. But, at the end of the day, you have to think long term in this business. It's just not about the one-off sale. It's about, what about, a couple years in the future when they decide to sell their home, or they're going to move up or move down. A lot of people don't think about that. A lot of them it's all about the money. So many agents kind of go too far with fiduciary, and they try to get stuff, even do things that are a little bit deceiving to get stuff, which I think is a problem. I've had absolutely everything happen to me. So, but I've worked with some really good agents that are reasonable and fair, and they're not doing things like threatening not to close if they don't get what they want the way they want it before closing. Just last weekend, I had an agent call, and she was there at the house showing. And one of the neighbors came up and said, hey, can we go in with you and look at the house? And I appreciate that she asked me that question. There are some agents that really are not comfortable with the word no. But I said no. I said, you don't know who, I don't care if they're neighbors, are you going to supervise them when they're in the house? We're giving you the benefit of being able to show this home, but if you have two groups of people in there at the same time, are you really watching them or not? So I declined that request, and I appreciate that she asked me for that. Not everybody will do that. And a lot of sellers really assume that the showings going on are only qualified buyers. And that's not true. There's a lot of agents that somehow connect with buyers via some kind of online thing. And many times the very first appointment, the very first time they're meeting with the buyer is at the house. And I don't know what they're asking. The requirement is that they have to have in writing how they'll get their fee, but there's no requirement for them to verify that they qualify for the house. And so it could be a big waste of time. Sometimes these agents are using that opportunity to open a door and show a house in order to maybe get them to show another house. So at some point they will actually, buy something. And so some of the things that agents do that I think are really not worth it to buyers are is they really don't verify that the buyer has the ability to perform, right? I've even had lenders call me and go, oh yeah, it's all good, they're all good. Then the next thing I know, they're terminating because they don't qualify. It's like, really? Didn't I already ask that question? Or and that's a bad thing because there are consequences. So if you accept a contract and then you go back on the market, then automatically other buyers and agents assume that there's something wrong with the house, not the buyer. And so it's unfortunate, and I have to usually field those questions when that happens. I have agents that will come in a home and actually state that they don't think the home is worth what the asking price is. Now, I don't know where they get that idea from, but it's a problem because it puts the idea, the buyers don't know, right? They're thinking that the agent is the expert on values and that house and everything else. So they're assuming that person has the expertise to make that call. I've seen them say stuff like it's not worth that much. I've seen them say stuff like, oh, this home won't be approved for this kind of financing that you want. There's no way. And that's really not true. So I've had agents put really faulty language into the contract that make it confusing. And technically, real estate agents are allowed to quote practice law by only filling in the documents that the lawyers created for us, the contract and the agreements. But sometimes I'll see these big, long paragraphs in blue that alter the contract and create all this new stuff. And technically, I would have to go back to an attorney to interpret what that means. Some of my favorite ones that I've seen are they'll put in this section of the contract that they say the seller has to disclose anything that affects the future value of the property and the buyer's future use. And I'm like, how would they know that? And why are you going to try to kind of open this liability door for the seller with a statement like that? So I always counter that one off because it doesn't make any sense. I've even gotten provisions in the contract that talk about the state of the world and crazy stuff. And at the end of the day, what the state wants and the way they've set up the real estate system here in Colorado is that they want the contracts to be understandable and not confusing, especially to the consumer. But at the end of the day, they don't require the agents to explain the contracts. It's not a requirement. They expect the consumer to read it and understand what they're signing. So sometimes they don't understand what they're signing. I like to explain it the way I know it, just because I don't want the seller to come back later and go, oh, I didn't understand that that's what that meant. But it doesn't have to be done. So there are some agents that just shove a 20-page contract to them and go, okay, read it, sign it, looks good to me, and that's it. So if you are thinking of making a move and you want somebody that has some good experience that has your back, give us a call at 719-301-3900 or go to barbhasthebuyers.com. Richard?
You're listening to Your Real Estate Voice. That's Barb Schlinker of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, host of the program. And if you're thinking of making a move, call Barb at 719-301-3900 or visit barbhasthebuyers.com. When we come back, we'll be discussing the last two top reasons why having a buyer's agent may not be worth it. So, Barb, we're discussing why having a buyer's agent may not be worth it. What are some of the other reasons?
Well, there's some agents that will make that kind of statement, like, I don't think the home is worth that much, or it won't be approved for financing. And really what they should be doing is reaching out to the listing agent and asking that question. Maybe ask them, hey, how'd you come up with the price? That kind of thing. Because the buyers kind of understand market value. They look at the history. They do a lot of research. I just recently wrote an offer for a buyer, and he goes, wow, they just bought it 2 years ago for this price. So they added 100,000 on top of it, and all they did was paint. And the prices haven't really gone up that much. So, it's hard for them to understand, why would I pay 100,000 more 2 years down the road when the prices have gone down, not up? There must be a reason. So, and then I get yelled at by the listing agent. Well, this is the asking price. If you're not going to bring a full price offer, why are you wasting my time? They just do stuff like that. And it's like, it's a negotiation, right? Hopefully we can come together and reach an agreement so that everybody can do what they want to do. The buyer wants to buy, the seller wants to sell. So I don't know why some people get all wound up about that stuff. And even if it's a low ball offer, it's not bad to counter. You never know where it's going. So I think negotiations actually is really not taught in the industry. A lot of them are just kind of messengers, and they may not know the backstory behind it. But at the end of the day, I would recommend sellers not get offended if they get a lowball offer, and just counter what they will accept. You never know. But the problem is that if half the agents don't sell any homes, and then the other 40% only sell 2 or 3 a year, and then the top 10% are selling 3 or more homes a year, how does an agent really know what the value is? Looking at the comps is not working right now because there's more inventory on the market. It's not really moving the bar. But that's a good question. I think the buyers typically know more about home value than the sellers do. And I recently had a buyer where they wanted to move up to another house. They actually had competition when they made their offer. And the listing agent let me know, hey, there's competition on this home. And so the buyer's like, well, what should I offer? And I said, well, it's up to you, but I would recommend that you put your best foot forward because you have competition. Turned out the other buyer had made a higher offer. However, they had a house to sell. So there was uncertainty with that buyer, but there was certainty with my buyer. And so my buyer got the house at a lower price. But had they come in super low, it may have not worked. So it just depends on the situation, what the competition is. And that's why communication is key. And if you have an agent that's not asking the right questions, it could be a problem. I had one just a few months ago that just shoved an offer, never called me. I never saw it coming. And it's like, oh, okay, I'll present that one too. But communication is absolutely critical if you're really working to try to get your client the house that they want and love. So if you are thinking of making a move, give us a call. Some agents absolutely are worth every bit of their value, and some of them not so much. So it's up to the buyer to make that decision, what that is worth to them. And the seller may contribute to the buyer's agent commission, but the buyer may have to pay for some of that. If you are thinking of making a move, give us a call, 719-301-3900, or go to barbhasthebuyers.com. Richard?
You're listening to Your Real Estate Voice. That's Barb Schlinker of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty. If you are thinking of making a move, call Barb at 719-301-3900 or visit barbhasthebuyers.com. A short break. When we come back, we'll be discussing the top 6 seller mistakes that can cause a house not to sell. Plus, we'll be talking about Barb's hot new listings. Don't miss that. Wow. Good.
I wasn't too dramatic.
No, but I think you got your point across. I gotta tell you, I mean, I listen to all that crap you have to go through, Barb, and I am not jealous. It reminds me of to a very large degree. I'd go in as an attorney, you sit down, and from the very first thing you do in the morning, whether it's a letter, whether it's a phone call, whether you're looking at a legal document, until you walk out of the office and on the train and at home, it's just one little hunk of aggravation after
It's not
another.
pig wrestling.
Yeah.
It sounds like pig wrestling
Yeah,
to me.
that's a good way to put it. I mean,
Yeah,
and
I got threatened this morning. I'm going to turn you into the division of real estate. And I'm
oh
like,
God, how much is a
"Hmm."
print like that worth? How do you have like 1,000 of them sitting around, or 500, or
I said, go ahead. If you want to wallow around in the mud, be my guest. I'm
yeah?
not going to participate.
You know, I
If you
hate
need,
people. Was this a young person, new person?
I don't know who he is, but it's just because he didn't follow the instructions and I pointed it out to him. I'm going to complain about you.
Oh God, you know what? I think
I'm
that's
like,
the
okay,
Thank
remedy.
you, Karen.
yeah,
Instead of
Karen.
remedying something, it's like, their first go-to is I'm going to complain about you, and I'm like, I honestly, I
I'm telling your mommy.
pretty much.
That's what it's like. I said, look, I suggest you talk to your broker. I don't want to hear it. I'm not going to argue with you about it anymore.
Yep.
These are the seller's rules. Full stop. Leave me alone. But that's what I don't care. What are you going to do? Take me to the MLS and book me because the seller, you know, wants to reschedule the inspection or, has rules about how you're going to invade my house, so they're crazy.
I think as time goes by in society, rules have come to mean less and less and less. And everybody believes, the rules don't apply to me. I don't need to follow this traffic rule. I don't need to follow this rule on a contract. I mean, of course, maybe I'm just getting old and grumpy. All right. Let's do section 4 here. I got it. We'll count
Okay.
it down in 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to Your Real Estate Voice with Barb Schlinker, the weekly radio show that informs and educates you on how to buy or sell real estate with Barb Schlinker. She is your real estate voice. She's the owner broker of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty and the host of the program. Barb, most home sellers have a great deal of love for their properties, and sometimes that translates into unrealistic beliefs, resulting in mistakes that could cost them thousands of dollars when the house does not sell. So, what are the top 6 seller mistakes that can cause a home not to sell or to sell for far less than was expected?
Well, I'd say the number one thing is pricing. Pricing is really, really critical. I've had homes that weren't that pretty, but they were priced right. And guess what? They sold and they sold quickly. And it's tough to figure out what is that sweet spot to get the most that you can for that home. You can't rely on Zillow. You can't rely on the averages. You can't rely on the tax assessment value. You can't even completely rely on similar sales. At the end of the day, the market, the buyers decide what they're willing to pay based on what's currently on the market at that time. And so obviously we're trying to help our sellers get the most money, but there are some people that just want it done. They don't even want to worry. They don't, it really depends on their priorities. And I think that really every home is special and unique. They're not all cookie cutter. And the buyers recognize when a home is a good deal. They can smell it like a bloodhound. I'm telling you, they know exactly if it's a good deal. And we know right away if it's priced right, if we're starting to get lots of inquiries from buyers and agents about our listings. But certain things are relatively inexpensive, easy fix to take care of, that you can do that might really make the difference between the home selling for full market value or not. One of them is carpet. If the carpet's worn and stained and not in good shape, a lot of buyers will reject it because they just don't have the money. They're getting into the home with all the resources that they have. They don't have the money to go in there and put in carpet before they move into the house. Or if it needs a lot of work, probably almost half the buyers would reject a home like that. And if the home is overpriced, the buyers are going to know right away. You'll be able to tell by the few number of showings and activity. If it's priced right, even if it's priced low for its condition, that will sell right away. I had one of just a few weeks ago that definitely the carpet needs to be replaced. Definitely it has some deferred maintenance. We had a huge crowd at the open house. We had 4 offers and it sold for full price. So I was pretty pleased by that, or actually over full price, because it's not a move-in ready house. So there are exceptions to it, but you have to work with somebody that has the expertise to knows how to position the home to get it done. And in that case, the sellers wanted a quick sale. They weren't going to wait for months and months for a buyer to close. And they didn't want any uncertainty. So really, the number one mistake is failure to make important improvements. And I will say on that some home sellers think that, well, if I put in new carpet, can I raise the price? Maybe. Basically, the way buyers look at it, they're expecting move-in ready. Your competition could be new construction. So they don't see that as, should I pay more if it has new carpet? They see it as what they expect. So if the home, doesn't look like, if it looks like it needs a lot of work, fixing what I call deferred maintenance doesn't necessarily increase its value. Things like an old furnace or an old water heater, if it needs to be replaced, replacing it doesn't tack that price onto the value. It just means that the buyer has a functional home that they can work with going forward. I see a lot of buyers criticize popcorn ceilings. I don't know why. It doesn't bother me, but some buyers just can't stand it. And it's kind of a messy job to get rid of the popcorn texture on ceilings. But I would definitely consider some realistic upgrades. Buyers, of course, love the cosmetic improvements. They expect broken things to be fixed. And you really want to get the home, get everything taken care of, like curb appeal, just fix the broken stuff. The front door is critical. But some of the spaces you don't have to worry so much about. We don't normally shoot the inside of closets or inside of garages. You just want to make sure that it looks fresh and attractive. And you don't have to take a picture of every nook and cranny of the house. The whole idea behind marketing is to get them there and then let the house speak when they get there. Another mistake could be that they make improvements after it's stale on the market. Generally, the buyers are going to put eyes on new listings within the first 10 to 30 days that it's on the market. So that's the best time to get stuff done. Price it right, correct it, so that buyers don't turn their nose up at it. And of course, pricing too high is a huge mistake. The market is going to speak back to you immediately if it's priced too high. You won't have showings, you won't have calls, you won't have requests. That's a clue. My name is Barb Schlinker. I'm the broker owner of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty and the host of this show, Your Real Estate Voice. And we're talking about the top 6 seller mistakes that may cause a home not to sell. And when we come back, we're going to discuss the rest of the mistakes and how you can avoid some of those mistakes. And if you are thinking of making a move, give us a call, 719-301-3900, or go to barbhasthebuyers.com. Richard?
So, Barb, what are other mistakes that home sellers might make that could cause a home not to sell at all?
Well, I would say pricing it right, of course, is important. And so what I try to do when I meet with sellers is really focus on, okay, based on what we think it will sell for, all of your selling expenses, what you owe, we take all that off and we give them a really good idea what they'll put in their pocket when it sells. That's the important number. Doesn't matter if it sells for this number or that number. It's like when it sells and you have this much money in your pocket, is it the right number to move on and do the things that you want to do? And I call that kind of just right pricing. Goldilocks pricing, if you will. I just sold a home in Rockrimmon where really I thought it was probably worth maybe $675. It was in very good condition, but the seller deployed my strategy of pricing it on the low end of similar sales. He priced it at $650. We had 63 people attend the open house. We had 4 offers and it sold for $50,000 over asking price, and it went fast. That's actually the way that you get the most money. I had one that priced his home slightly low because he had some condition issues. Some of the systems weren't working very well, and he knew that, so he priced it below market. Again, a huge crowd at the open house, and it sold for over asking price. But had I priced it at that high number, it wouldn't have sold for that number. And you can tell if you're a little bit off. If you're getting a high volume of showings and it's not working, like I had one home a few years ago where it was literally a 50s time warp. It had the, gray and pink bathrooms. The kitchen was original and it was not in good shape. And the seller was a kitchen designer, so he couldn't let that go. So he redid the kitchen. It was beautiful. And we thought we priced it right. We had lots of showings, but no offers. We ultimately, all he had to do was make a tiny price adjustment, and boom, it sold right away at full price. So the market's going to speak back to you right away. The other thing that's a huge mistake is letting an agent post a bad image about the property. Buyers are, as compared to like when I first got in the business back in the 90s, the typical buyer back then would look at anywhere from 25 to, I think my record was 127 homes before they pick one. It's a lot of pain driving around, looking at it, going in and out. It's a lot of work to find the right home. And nowadays, that doesn't happen anymore. The buyers are making decisions as to whether or not they're even going to waste their gas money on a home based on the online pictures. So that is your first showing. You have to make sure you hire the agent that gets that right. Still to this day, I see agents that are too cheap and too lazy to hire professional photographers. And the next thing you know, they're using iPhone pictures and there the house sits on the market without selling. And then also, if you sell on your own, now there are some people that can do that. Maybe they have somebody they know that wants to buy the home and they're fine with that price. Nothing wrong with it. However, if you're going for sale by owner, it's a little tougher to get top value. And it seems like nine times out of 10, there's a real estate agent that injects themselves into the process. And then as a seller, you find yourself, especially if that agent's representing the buyer, you find yourself at a disadvantage. So I wouldn't recommend it these days, especially with the market softening like it is. And then another problem that sellers do is, in general, if you don't price it right, if you don't present the home properly to the market, the buyers either aren't going to look at it or they aren't going to make an offer. So another common mistake is not listening to the feedback. Sometimes agents will give very constructive feedback, and I really appreciate it. They'll come through and they'll show it and they'll go, well, my buyer found a better home in that price range. That tells me it's a pricing issue. Or I had one recently where they said, the comments don't match the house. I'm like, oh, okay, that's constructive. I'll go ahead and make that change to the public description. But they will give feedback on pricing, condition, how the showing experience went, and kind of what the buyers are looking at, what the competition is. So if the seller doesn't respond to that, that's kind of a huge mistake not to do that. So if you are thinking of making a move, and you'd like to get some advice on what to do, what not to do to get your house ready for sale, give us a call, 719-301-3900, or go to barbhasthebuyers.com. Richard?
You're listening to Your Real Estate Voice with Barb Schlinker of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty. If you're thinking of making a move, call Barb at 719-301-3900 or visit barbhasthebuyers.com. Barb, it's time for the lightning round of some of your hot new listings. Tell us about them.
I have a great one in Briargate at 454,999. This home has 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, an abundance of gleaming hardwood floors, granite in the counter, backs to open space. Really, really nice home in the mid 4s. Another one up in Cripple Creek that could work out as an Airbnb or a duplex on Carr Avenue at 292. Great home in Woodland Park in the low 3s on Highway 24. A fabulous home on Tower Road. They just lowered the price to $499. This home has been rented out. The basement was rented out as an Airbnb, and the seller actually collected $15,000 a year. So you really could get half your payment paid. I have a beautiful home on Pinecrest in Woodland Park on 4 acres with stunning views and a 3-car garage in the upper 5s, a spectacular patio home in Pine Creek in Briargate on Spanish Oak Terrace, backs to the golf course, has great views, but there's some good mature trees right behind the house so that the golf balls actually don't hit the house. And that one's priced at $749. Another beautiful home in down by Peterson Air Force Base, a gorgeous rancher on Christie Court at $425. And then an amazing home in Rock Rimmon on Big Valley that has a detached 3rd-car garage, man cave, plus it's in superb condition in a very private lot. We also have a beautiful house on Broadmoor Bluffs, backs to NORAD with fresh carpet, great home at $684. Another one in Monument on True Vista at $735, beautiful yard, great home. A great deal down by the Broadmoor on Leeming Drive in the mid-9s, and then a spectacular house in High Forest Ranch on Open Skyway. And there's always many more. Got one coming up this week, actually in the southwest part of town on Beckett Drive. So if you are thinking of making a move, give us a call, 719-301-3900, or go to barbhasthebuyers.com. Richard?
You've been listening to Your Real Estate Voice. It airs every Saturday, 11 o'clock, right after Kudlow. If you're thinking of making a move, call Barb, 719-301-3900, or visit barbhasthebuyers.com. And you can see replays of Barb's show at barbhasthebuyers.com, or listen to the podcast on all of the popular podcast platforms like Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, many, many others. Thanks for listening. To reach out to Barb, again, that number is 719-301-3900. Have a great week, Barb. We'll talk to you next weekend.
Thank you. Happy 4th of July weekend.
Independence Day.
Maybe I shouldn't say that if you want to go evergreen. I'll just say, thank you. Have a fabulous weekend.
There you go.